All right, I got one last lecture about persuasion for you. And I want to talk about, we talked about persuasion that's changing someone's mind. Now I want to talk about how to actually do it, how to make an argument. So, what is a persuasive argument? Well, when we say make an argument, we don't say, "Oh, you're smelly and you're ugly." That's not an argument. That's just an insult. We say a sort of use of evidence and ethos and logos and pathos to convince the other side or the audience to change their mind. And I think it's useful to think about it as like a court case. Both sides are trying to convince the jury or the judge that their side's right. This person is guilty or they're innocent. So you got, how do you do that though? How do you make the argument? You're not going to do it by insulting. Oh, look how terrible they are. Look at their bad suit. Look how ugly they are. No, that's not how you make a court case argument, right? An argument in a court case. What you do is through evidence, right? So here we go. Imagine you have a case with a student being charged with stealing a car. How would you convince the judge that this person's guilty or they're innocent? Now, remember, in a court case, you have to submit your evidence ahead of time. So both sides pretty much know what the opposing side, what evidence they have. So it's not just citing their sources, it's not just citing facts, it's the interpretation of it. So this is what we call the warrant. The warrant is the explanation. So in our court case, the prosecution would say he's guilty. You need proof. Okay, he's caught with the keys. The car was in his garage. The fingerprints are on his car. Now, in a lot of cases, the proof or the evidence is enough. It's kind of obvious. You come in from outside and you're covered in snow. Like, wow, it must be cold outside. I don't need to explain why you being covered in snow would lead me to think it was cold out. But in some situations, you do need to explain it. So, again, remember I said both sides in a court case have the same evidence. So, one side would try to explain why this evidence makes the person seem guilty. The other side would try to explain that evidence away. It's like, so obviously the prosecution would say, look, why else would this person have the keys? Why would they have the garage? They didn't have it and they didn't have permission. And why would their fingerprints be on it? Clearly, this person was caught red handed. But what about the defense? How would the defense try to explain this evidence away? So we're going for the meaning. What does the evidence, what do the facts, what does the evidence, what does it mean? That's what we're really after in a good argument, the meaning. Well, what would the defense say? Well, maybe they would say he'd found the keys. That's a perfectly logical explanation of why someone would have a car keys that didn't belong to them. Look, Your Honor, my client just found the keys. They woke up that morning, found the keys laying on the kitchen table. He's like, what's this? He went outside, went into the garage. The car was there. And he's like, what's going on? The fingerprints are on it because he opened the door and he tried to find the registration. He was getting ready to call the police right when they showed up. He is a victim here just as much as a person that owned the car. So I'm using the same evidence, but my explanation is different. My warrant, what they call it, and it's unfortunate that it's called warrant because that makes you think of like a warrant for arrest. And in some ways, think about what a warrant is for arrest for. It's basically saying, here's why we want you arrested. So that's kind of what a warrant is. It's a explanation. So you needed explanation. So what do we need? So to make a good argument, we got to have these 3 points. got to have a claim. My client is innocent. Here's the evidence. Sure, yes, we admit that he was found with the keys. We admit that he had the car. We admit his fingerprints were on it. But there's the warrant, the explanation. Here he had the keys because he found them. He doesn't know how the car got into his garage, and his fingerprints are on the car because he was trying to find out who owned it. So the warrant is the explanation. So think of it this way. Think of it like the glue that holds the data and the claim together. Without glue, without mortar between the bricks, they would just fall over. So that's like your argument falls apart without explanation. So a claim has to be something you can argue. It can't be just personal opinion. And for our perspectives, our points, not our perspectives, our purposes rather, the claim has to be controversial and able to be defended. You have, for the debates, it has to be something that that a reasonable person would disagree with. So wear your seatbelt. That's not a good one because reasonable people agree, yes, you should wear your seatbelts. Also should be controversial. Smoking's another bad one. Is there anybody you think that, at least in North America, maybe in other parts of the world, but in North America, do you think there's anybody that smokes that doesn't know it's bad for them and that they should quit? No. So that's also not a bad argument. That's not a good claim. So a claim should not be too obvious. So wear your seatbelt. Smoking's dangerous for you. Those are too obvious. Also has to be engaging. What's in it for me? So, for example, students sometimes want to do, I don't know, corporal punishment in high schools. I'm not in high school. I don't have kids. Why should I care? Now, that's not to say you couldn't do that, but you have to make me care. You have to make your class care. And it should not be too vague. Be a good person. That's too vague. You got to be fairly specific. So they got to be logical and debatable. You know, you can't argue matters of taste. You can't argue things that, I believe that children are our future. Well, you can't really argue if I believe that or not. So, data, of course, good evidence, good sources. But let's get to the warrant. It explains the connection. Again, it explains it. So there we go. It's another picture. Acts as a bridge, acts as a so what question. So let me give you a good example here. So this is from a book called The Craft of Research. And this is one of the best explanations of a warrant that I've found. So here is their argument, not mine. Contrary to popular belief, gun ownership in America was probably not widespread in the first half of the 19th century and before because guns were rarely mentioned in wills. A review of almost 4,500 wills in 7 states from 1750 to 1850 shows only 11% of them mention a gun or handgun. So we have a claim. Gun ownership in America was not widespread. We have evidence. Here's a review of nearly 4,500 wills. Only 11% had guns. However, you're probably asking yourself, what does that have to do with anything? It's missing a warrant. It's missing an explanation. So in this one, I just have a little bit of, I highlighted the claim in green there and the data in the blue. But what's the connection? Well, here's a connection. Here's the warrant. Here's where they explain what gun ownership has to do with wills. Well, the explanation is guns were valuable. And in the 18th and 19th century, and even today, people put valuable objects in their will. So if somebody didn't put it in their will, they didn't own it. Because guns were valuable, but they weren't mentioned in wills, that leads us to believe that a lot of people didn't have guns. Now, you can debate whether guns are valuable. I don't know. That's another claim. That's an unsupported claim. Needs evidence, needs citations. But as a warrant, I think that's good because you wouldn't think that gun ownership and wills had any connection. But here they're trying to make it. It's not perfect, but there we go. So when you make your speech, when you make your outline, what you're going to do is basically have three, approximately, maybe four claims, three arguments. And each of the argument is going to have claim, data, warrant, claim, data, warrant. And you don't have to have it exactly in that order. But you need to have three reasons why your side is correct. Here are three reasons why we should ban the death penalty. And for each of my reasons about the death penalty, I'm going to have a claim, going to use evidence, and explain how that evidence is connected to my claim. All right, so there we go. Claim, data, and warrant. You got to have those three things to make a good argument. All right. So now that we know how to make a good argument, I want to have you guys have good arguments for your debates. So start, if you haven't already, start thinking about what you're going to want to do for your final persuasive speech.